Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. You got me, Brian Ritchie, as well as Nora St. John, and we have a special guest today. That's right. Today we're going to be interviewing a friend of the podcast, Tom McCook, and we'll get more into that. We're super excited to have you here today, Tom. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. And how are you doing today, Nora?
I'm good. It's sunny here. We're heading into, well, I don't know if we're heading into fall yet, but it is California, so we're slowly heading in that direction.
Oh,
doing well.
We had a brief respite here on the East Coast, and it was beautiful for about 4 days and high of the upper 70s. It was wonderful. And today it's going to be over 100. So yeah, that was a very short period of time. It was a little warm walking outside a little while ago. So yeah. It still reminds us it's still summertime.
Well, Tom's on the Northern California coast, so he's got completely different weather.
Yeah, it's actually overcast, and we have the summer fog right now. It's probably about 60 degrees.
Wow.
Have you been seeing all the whales off the coast?
Absolutely, especially right now. We've seen a ton, and we walk at night up by the bluffs, and right now they're coming up and they're feeding, like opening their mouths, like 6 or 8 of them at a time. It's amazing.
Very cool.
Super cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Really fun.
I'm so jealous.
Al and I, between Tampa and Seoul, there's a whole day that I was hanging out in San Francisco. So we drove out to Pacifica and basically just hung out on the bluff, and we were hanging out on the bluff looking at the ocean, and wait a minute, that's a whale, and that's a whale, and they're everywhere.
It's beautiful.
Wow.
That is very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We're very blessed to live on the coast and see that pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Wow. That's spectacular. Well, before we get into the official introduction, I want to remind everybody, do us a favor. If you like what you hear, hit the like, hit the subscribe, whatever your podcast, choice is. That way, every week it's in your inbox. You know when it's there. You know what the new topic is. And I highly recommend you do it. And we'd appreciate any comments you could leave as well. Give us a 5-star rating if you can on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That'd be awesome. It pushes us up a little bit higher through their algorithms. Also, check us out on YouTube under my name, Brian Ritchie. And yeah, you can always reach us also at Gmail. We have a Gmail account through movingconvos@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, comments, or any guests that you'd like us to bring on, easiest way to hit us up. And Instagram, as always, is @movingconvos. So, Nora, if you will do the honors and introduce our guest today.
So welcome, Tom. Tom and I have known each other for over 20 years now. Tom has been a major collaborator and inspiration in my personal journey for a really long time. He runs a studio called Center of Balance in Northern California, Mountain View, California. And he's done that for a long time. He's got a really strong background in functional anatomy, in the Franklin method, in all kinds of ways of looking at movement. Tom is a perpetual student, and I've always learned something from his studies as well. So, Tom, we had a first question for you. And the first question is, what is kind of the first, if you can remember it, the first experience or situation that kind of started you on this journey towards being a movement professional for your whole career?
Wow, great question. Well, I have 8 brothers, and I'm the youngest of 8. So one of my goals when I decided that I needed to use my body better was I needed to get stronger to deal with my brothers. So at 11 years old, I had built a gym in my cellar, and I was training the whole neighborhood. And,
wow.
and half of my friends in the neighborhood had 8 or 10 kids too. I grew up outside of Boston, and we just had this neighborhood full of kids that were really athletic and either were trying to kill each other or figure out some stuff and have fun. So that was really, I didn't know at the time that that's where I would end up as far as this is a profession, but I always found it right away that it was really natural for me as a way to connect with people around movement and just my own excitement around learning how to use the body better. And I always was very interested when I watched people move. Why do some people make it look easy? Especially athletes. And that just always, I had a strong curiosity from day one in that regard. I started playing hockey at 5 years old, and I always gravitated to watching the ones that were really efficient and made it look easy. And I think that was the beginning of it, of just like, oh, well, how is that happening? Why is some people struggle and other people don't? And that's the long road. Now I'm 62, so it's been a long journey of doing that. But I think that was the start of it.
Nice.
And then I moved to California when I was 20 with, again, not knowing that I would be in the fitness world at all. I came out here as an exploration. I started school and I was managing Gold's Gym at night. This was in the mid 80s. And this was right when fitness training was starting. There was only one fitness trainer in Gold's Gym at the time. This is in Northern California. And I was managing the gym at night. And I just watched the way people train. And I had already been training for 10 years. My brothers all worked out. One of my brothers owned a karate school for like 50 years. And so I just had a kind of a clue of what good training was, even though I hadn't had a lot of formal training yet. So I started my own training business. I said, okay, I'm just going to do this. And within 3 months, I had 40 appointments a week.
Nice.
And that was the beginning of it. So I changed my trajectory and actually just started taking continuing education every year till now. So I've kept on that path of learning. And I think another big shifting moment for me was when I was 27. I had my business for probably 3 years at the time. I went and got went to a demonstration of shiatsu, and I had never had a massage. I grew up in in New England, Irish Catholic family. We didn't really do a lot of massaging. So it was not part of the mode. So I got to be the guinea pig of the demonstration. And what I think one of the things that appealed to me about it is you did it with your clothes on. There's no oil. It was just very manual, and it looked really practical. And I got to be the guinea pig of the demonstration. And I was like, oh my God, it just felt amazing. The guy was just really gifted. So I took his training, and that actually changed my trajectory around fitness and wellness and what was possible. And prior to that, it was mainly weight training for a long time. So that took me on a trajectory of studying body work and getting exposed to somatics, which is somatics really just means the life of your body. How do I live in my body in its wholeness? Inside of that, I got exposed to Pilates. One of the women in my training was a Pilates teacher, and I had never heard of Pilates. And she was in great shape, and I asked her what she did. She goes, I do Pilates. And I found a studio in Palo Alto around the corner from my house. I could walk to it. And I started taking 2 to 3 privates a week. I did that for 6 years. And it was really interesting. After one Pilates session, I stopped lifting weights at that time, because I just knew intuitively that I wouldn't change the patterns in my body if I kept doing what I'd been doing. I think weight training is great. I still do it now, but I took a big break from it and really worked on movement quality and learning how to move my spine better. And so that was just, that's my road is kind of meandered around. And I just kind of luckily followed my own curiosity of what made me feel more alive. And that still kind of guides me, I believe. I think my learning curve is partially to be a better teacher, but partially just to stay inspired. And I also think that when you're teaching, what's always been interesting for me as a question is when I look at a class, if I'm teaching a class, how do I level the playing field for the class? Instead of just the people that already move well getting the most out of the class. Mm-hmm. I took that on as my responsibility instead of grin and bear it for the students that don't get it. So I kind of feel like that's our job as teachers. How do we get them curious about their own body, give them some useful things to think about, maybe even some self-touch, and then let them develop their own curiosity and feeling of their body. And then I think we're on the right path as teachers.
I think it's very interesting. You've used the word curiosity a lot, and that's something that I have always said, that true students of whatever we are, whatever we consider ourselves, you know, to be, are always curious. We're always learning. We're always trying to strive to learn more. Not that we want to be better teachers than anybody else or be higher achievers or any of that. It's more for ourselves.
Right.
I want to do better and I want to know more. That's so interesting, and it'll help me just understand more.
Absolutely.
And, you know, you got into, all three of us have a massage background.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we all have a fitness background in one way, shape, or form, you know, and I find it interesting that we sort of have all sort of taken a multi-modality approach.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
that it's, you know, you take a little from here, you take a little from here, you take a little from here, and you bring it all together to create the biggest picture of who you are and your practice.
It's so true, because all the things that you add enhance what you already know.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, it's interesting because I think we've all studied with a lot of talented teachers and a lot of people out there. And a lot of the people that have their own systems don't study with anybody else.
Yep.
And I think that's actually a mistake. I think it's actually, you can pick up something from everybody. And I've always had that perspective of, I love being a student. You know, if you're teaching a lot and you're just giving, you got to refill the tank. But also it's just nice to drop out of knowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like it doesn't, you know, I think one of the best decisions I made as a studio owner, we've had our studio for 27 years, is to do staff workouts every week with our staff for the last 27 years. And for the first 15 years, it was every Tuesday and Thursday from 3 to 5, no students allowed in the studio, just the teachers. Nice. Now it's once a week. And that's created a culture. But I always would tell my staff, I say, listen, say I don't know at least once a day.
Yep.
And also, you know, ask more questions. It's okay to not know, and reveal to your other colleagues that knowing isn't the goal. It's actually how do you help somebody be more skillful with himself, and you can figure things out as you go. And that's a much better road for all of us instead of having answers from my perspective.
And what you just said also shows a maturity level that a lot of the younger students that I've taught, and a lot of the younger trainers and Pilates instructors, even, we have insecurity that we feel that we have to know everything. We have to be everything to the person in front of us. And no one wants to say they don't know. And how many, I mean, both of you have experienced this, I'm sure, but I go to the gym and I try and be an anonymous and everything, but you can't help but overhear people, and you can hear them pulling answers out of their you-know-whats, you know, and it's sort of like, you have no idea what you're talking about whatsoever. And I don't say anything, but I'm thinking, just say you don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
But what I say is, I don't know, but you know what? I'm going to find out.
That's it right there.
That's interesting to me. So let's find out together and take this exploration.
It's so true. And I say the same thing to my staff. I say, when your client asks you a question and the next thing out of your mouth is, that's because, just know the next thing is BS. Because you're making it up. It's, you know, I mean, you might have a good idea of possibilities. Sure. The longer you teach, you can figure things out faster. Yeah. But it doesn't really empower the student either. You know, it's really like, I think of like sessions are co-created with your student. If you're really working together, where their experience and what they think is actually in some ways more important than what we think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what you guys were just talking about there, and the way you were talking about it was exactly that. Like, there's the student or the teacher that needs to know what they know, needs to say what they think is happening. But really the bigger question is, what is the experience? What is that client's experience in this moment? Mm-hmm. Because so often, and I remember this from being a younger teacher, I would assume something was happening. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I'm seeing something and I'm thinking, oh, this is because of my brain's making the story about this is what's happening. And then I ask the client what's happening. And what they tell me is completely different than what I think is going on.
Yeah.
So it's also like, okay, not only do I not know, but you actually do know. We just have to figure out a way for you to pay attention so that you can really provide the information to yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, that's, I think, another way for me to say it, like, is how do I cultivate strong sensibility in my clients?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, where they're really like, oh, I have some know-how here. I have some ways of helping myself, and I'm just here to enhance that. And then and to take that into their life. And I think like I was talking to you about the somatic work, like one of my main somatic teachers, a guy named Richard Heckler, would say, I talked to him about fitness, and he would say this a lot. He goes, you can be really fit and still be an a-hole.
Absolutely.
So,
Clearly.
So if you're not along with your mind, body, fitness, if you're not cultivating the person you want to be in the world, there's a big missing part of the pie chart. So for me, that's always been in some ways more important than the fitness part, is like, who are you becoming? Who are you practicing being in the world on a daily, regular basis? And what practices are helping you do that? And your movement practices can help you do that too, because then you can learn how to be kinder to yourself when you're training, because we can be very self-critical when we're trying to create change, and our clients can too. And I think that gets in the way if you don't find ways to address that, and open it up as normalizing it, because, another way of saying it is like, we all have conditioned tendencies. We all have our ways that we grew up and we got conditioned that are, got us here. We're here. So, but the downside is we can make those ways wrong, instead of actually normalizing them and then acknowledging them as that they were developed from an honest place to survive, and they helped us. Yeah. Now we're just looking to improve.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that to me is a big part of working with people, because when people know that you see them for those things, the trust level goes way up. And that's just a nice, because we all have our conditioned tendencies. You don't get through a life without having them. So that's for me, that becomes more interesting way to work with people, instead of it just about muscles and bones and movement. It's more about, okay, how is this helping this person be who they want to be in the world?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to listening, because a lot of times I see this, people go through the motions, and instead of listening to the client and listening to their body, not just what they're saying, but what the client's body is doing in front of you and how it's moving, what story it's trying to tell you. Unless you're attuned to that and can make yourself quiet and not just assume, and portray and, project what you think is there, but let it really tell you what's there. I think that's so important. And I think that comes with, being in the industry for a while, first of all, but also just being willing to be quiet and just let the body talk to us.
Yes. Yeah. That's so true. So true. Yeah, so that to me makes it the training becomes much more interesting when you open up that perspective of working with people, and why do they have tension patterns? It's not just about stretching muscles. There's other things going on here. How do you help them breathe and feel themselves and open up their aliveness in the areas of their body that they tend to not feel? And those are really helpful perspectives that don't have to be, like you're saying, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be helping them listen while you listen with them. And that's just some beautiful exchanges can happen in those moments. And those are, and you think of it, in our field, I think another thing that teachers forget is giving somebody an hour of concentrated attention is a serious gift.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, our work is so valuable when you're giving somebody clear attention for that amount of time, and then you're bringing in your skills to that. That creates a lot of incredible change for people, and the relationships that the people that our clients, they really value that time. It's like they're not going to give that up for anything once they connect to that.
Yeah. Well, how many of our clients never speak to another person face to face during the day?
Right.
They may in the morning with their spouse, but during the day now, so many people are on Zoom calls. So many people are on the telephone. They may never have a real honest exchange with many people,
it's true.
And yet when they come into us, there's that amount of what I call high touch, not high tech, where we get to have a verbal exchange, but almost a metaphysical exchange at the same time, where we're connecting on a deeper level. and we could talk about anything we want, but also get in tune with our bodies and really just see where it wants to take us. So I think that that's very valuable.
Yeah, it's amazing. And even just you saying that, I'm already feeling like as a teacher, if you're not getting that for yourself or finding a way to do that, you can start to resent your clients. You're like, what about me?
I've been there in the past.
When I teach, I've taught with Nora and I, we've taught a lot on Pilates on tour and all over the world. And one of the questions that I asked in the workshops, in the beginning of the workshops usually, which isn't really a good selling point, but I asked this question anyway, is how many of you guys have bought into the story that you're too busy to do your own personal practice? And half the room will raise their hand, and I'm like, so why are you here? Are you here to learn more shit you're not going to use?
And the thing is, Tom, that the other half is lying, in my experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the half that raise their hand are being honest, the other half are mostly lying, with a few exceptions.
And I said, okay, so before we go any further, I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell them how often you're going to practice what we're about to do over the next month. Because it's like, because you can't pretend that you're knowing what you're learning if you're not practicing it.
No.
You can go through the motions, but you're not authentically teaching it from a experiential place, which I think is vital for us as movement teachers.
So let me bring this up, because this is where I feel like, Tom, your voice in our world has been unbelievably valuable, is basically integrity in terms of your own practice, integrity in terms of your own relationship to your own body, integrity in terms of working with your clients in an honest feedback kind of way. So there's really a back and forth there that works. And just, just like you said, if you don't feel it, if you don't know what you're doing, if you can't feel it in your own body, it's hard to teach somebody else. Now, I'm going to feel it differently than Tom does. Tom and I can do exactly the same thing, or Tom, Brian, and I will do the same exercise. We'll feel it differently, but we'll all have our own experience, and we've all worked with that experience of what that is and how that feels in our bodies and what this means and what that means. And that's really something that, I always have admired about what you do and think is really the pillar on which you built your practice, is that level of integrity and that level of personal practice and personal commitment to the work.
Thank you. For me, if I don't practice, it's not good. I actually don't feel inspired. I actually feel like self-doubt comes back in. All the things like when you're a little bit out of integrity with yourself around any area of your life, like if you feel like you have a commitment to being good at something, you need to do the things that you already know for that to be so. And we all know that. It's like every person can quickly identify the things that they need to do to be right with themselves about their profession or their health, whatever. Luckily for us, we're in a profession where our health and movement is our profession. So we have impetus and we have, some power behind it of why we're doing it, but we get the benefit of that. But personally, if I don't do my own practice, I suffer. I don't feel good I'm not inspired. I have a little bit of a tinge of a bad attitude. That's not a good thing. But I think just in general, I find that in teacher trainings, all of us here have done a lot of them, is like the questions that come up around, well, how am I going to get to teach that? And I'm like, where it just flows. I said, by practicing, just do it daily, do a little bit every day, do something, and if you do that, success is just natural outcome of that. It's just a natural thing, because then you're sharing from your own experience, and the body is brilliant. I mean, I'm just amazed at, I was telling Nora over the last few weeks, I'm coming out of healing a shoulder injury that I had, where I fractured 2 bones in my shoulder and tore 3 muscles. But it came from a history of playing sports, playing quarterback and pitching and contact sports, where I probably had a partial dislocation in my shoulder as a kid. And I had what's called a Hill-Sachs lesion, which is a divot in the top of your humeral head, which I didn't even know about. And I put myself in a position in a perfect storm that exposed that and actually dislocated my shoulder and had this injury that was really quick. And I was like, wow, that was not so good. So, and that can happen to anybody at any time, right? So,
Yep.
So I got an evaluation that week and they said, you definitely need surgery, blah, blah, blah. And then I just started my own prehab because the surgery was scheduled for a month later. And then right before the surgery, I got evaluated again by another doctor. And he said, you test strong in every position. You got great mobility. Let's pass on the surgery. So I haven't done surgery. And I know it's because of what I know about the body and that I let my body kind of tell me what I could do with it. Not that, surgery might have been a possibility, but I know my approach made it possible for me to not have surgery. And now I can do everything again. I'm only 2.5 months out. I can do planks, side planks, push-ups, and I have no pain in my shoulder. So I just think the body is designed to heal. It's regenerative, and there's still a lot we don't know about the power of the healing power of our body if we're promoting that. I think think of like in our world today, how many people are talking about spinal problems and blah, 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 instead of using their mind when they train to promote the spine they want. And the Franklin training is something I've been teaching for over 20 years. And I think that's a big open door around training our imagery and our attention around desired results while we're training, which is, it's still in its infancy of how people do that. And it's a really big deal because our brain's designed for looking for the threat. So we have to kind of cultivate that super highway of what we want instead of it being a dirt road, So that's a big piece for me too, the power of positive change that can be created by your attention and imaging a desired outcome with a little bit of better understanding of how the body's actually designed.
Nice.
On top of that.
Nice.
And that we can blend that into any training environment too. Doesn't matter the modality really.
Well, something that you and I talked about, this was years ago when we first met, is a lot of it comes down to movement quality.
Yeah.
We can spot, we've been at this a long time, but I tell my students this all the time. Just start watching people. Don't try and figure anything out. Just watch. Look at movement quality.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to be able to train your eye. And once you start getting that and start seeing where is someone stuck, where do they have good movement quality, where do they not have good movement quality, and just beginning to affect a change there can begin to affect a change in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Their body begins moving better and suddenly it takes pressure off of other areas where they were compensating, they no longer have to, and their body begins to just begin to move toward that healing process.
Right.
And it can make a huge difference for people.
Absolutely. That's such a great place for teachers to spend a lot of time. Just stay there. How do I just notice good movement or the subtleties of slightly not great movement? And how do I correct that? And how do I help the person notice it? And that's more than 50% of the battle right there. If you just stay there and help people really feel, and then also really getting clear on teaching people where they're initiating a movement from.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal because, you see a lot of beginning teachers, if you're teaching people how to move their spine, because Pilates is more specific to that, of really having people either initiate from their pelvis or top down from their head and doing it in a way where they're really getting that sense of initiating from the right place. And if you start to be able to see it, it becomes easier and easier to correct it.
Yep.
And it becomes more satisfying too, because you can just use a simple verbal or combined with a hands-on cue, and you can really help somebody feel something very quickly where the discomfort goes away and they create a little more length with tone. And that's just a really sweet thing to see and see a client's confidence go up really quickly.
Absolutely.
Really fun.
I think this is the root of sort of what Brian and I talk about, what you and I talk about, is giving the client the experience of something different,
Mm.
and then helping them to find their way to that on their own. But
Mm.
we often provide the environment, we provide the feedback, we provide the hands-on tools to help them feel something. But really, ultimately, it's like, okay, I always say we're like putting the breadcrumbs out, and they've got to then follow the breadcrumbs themselves, right?
Mm.
So that's that self-empowerment piece that we work on for people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And then getting away from right and wrong.
Yes. From
Yes.
shoulds. You should look like this.
Yeah.
You should look like that.
Yeah. Being more in the experience of how does it feel and how am I organizing myself? How am I creating the conditions to have a great movement experience?
Yes.
And then it's just a whole nother world of inspirational movement and actually having fun while you're learning. And sure, focused attention is, can be rigorous and intense at times, but I think that's fun too. I think we all like to be really focused and in something 100%. It's a very satisfying feeling to do something where you're fully committed to it, and then trusting your body at the same time. How great is that?
Nice.
It's the best.
Go ahead, Nora. I was just thinking that I was literally having this conversation with someone yesterday who was asking me my opinion on a specific case that they were working with a client. And I could see that they were very wrapped up in right and wrong, that this is the movement that we're looking for. And finally I said, I need you to turn that off and just let them move. Because for some people, those compensations are keeping them out of pain.
That's so
and
true.
Maybe they're not so bad. If you're talking about a 75-year-old person who might have a little deviation here, but if it keeps them out of pain, well, guess what? We can strengthen around that area and get them to move better eventually. But how about not looking at the two scales being, right and wrong, or of all the ways to do this is what's perfect, is this small little narrow band.
So true.
Whereas black and white, there's so much gray.
So true. It's so true.
And allow the body to move.
So true. And the truth is, our bodies are so brilliant that they'll find 1,000 different ways. And that's what I tell my clients is your body's perfect all the time. Meaning that it's always picking the best choice that it can sense. It would never pick anything else.
Yes.
So our job is just to give it better choices, but not necessarily think we already know what that is.
Yep.
I totally agree with you. And that's such a better road. And it really values how brilliant our body is. Our body is designed for survival. It's designed to actually find the right way if we're giving it a way to feel itself.
It's designed for efficiency. I mean, it really is. And if it feels the efficiency and it feels that something feels better and moves better, if it gets that experience, then it'll go down that path.
It will.
See so many clients given that experience, it's like then they start to play with it on their own. You see their eyes light up and you see how they're walking differently, they're sitting differently, they're trying to find that connection in their regular movements. And this brings up something else that I wanted to just bring up here, which is and both of you do this really well, and it's certainly been something that I aspire to on a regular basis, is exactly that. How am I going to make that client move in functional ways that are more efficient and effective for them? And what I mean by that is, again, not having an idea of what is right for them or what they need to do, but really looking at what is possible for them and how do we make that particular system, and not just an individual movement or an individual exercise or an individual alignment, but how to make that whole system work more efficiently and effectively. So it's also like, taking that step back from right and wrong and going, they really do need to rotate more when they walk. They need to rotate less when they walk, right? I mean, all those little steps of looking at the whole system and understanding how it goes together.
Yeah, what I love about what you're saying too is that it's really student-centered teaching. It's not teacher-centered teaching. It's more like, what is this? Like, there's so much a higher level of respect for the person's own experience in their own body that you're in relationship with. So you're getting more curious about asking questions instead of having answers. You're getting curious about how something feels. You're letting them, you're heightening their own sense of themselves in a way that you're in this relationship from that perspective. And I think that's when you're really dancing well together with somebody. And that's the way, and I've worked with a lot of athletes, that's the way that I've always worked with them. I would always ask them, what do they want to improve? And then, stuff would get exposed that they didn't mention, but I would always tap into what was their experience of something before I would tell them how it is, because it never went very well when I did that. So it's very interesting just to kind of, like, I think the other thing, as humans, we're not that great at self-referral.
No.
As much as we think we are. So having somebody outside of our body to give us feedback of stuff that we can't see or feel is super valuable. And into dialogue about that.
No, it's like trying to train it's like trying to train yourself. I mean, yes, you can train yourself, but if you never have an outside eye, I guarantee you're missing things.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you can't see and feel. You can only see and feel what you see and feel.
Right.
Right? Like your own experience limits you in the way that your own experience always limits you.
And being open to that, being open to, like, someone's feedback is really, really valuable.
Yeah.
Especially if you're already a good mover, you're going to take stuff in pretty quickly, and then you can really run with it. Super helpful. And I've been doing PT for my shoulder with a woman who works with us, a woman named Therese, who's given me great feedback that I cannot give myself. So it's been really, really helpful. And
we can never see our own bodies.
No.
Not the same way someone else can, because as soon as you turn your head to look at yourself in the mirror or adjust yourself, everything changes.
Everything's different. Yeah. Because then you're a little bit outside yourself, looking at yourself too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a very interesting process. And I think if you've been training a long time, you can get pretty far with your own practice, but it just accelerates things and makes everything a little more rich and interesting to get that feedback. It's a great gift to yourself too, if you're working all the time, to have some private sessions for yourself on a regular basis, or group stuff.
And it's nice to have someone else say something that you may never see of yourself, that you may never have known about yourself, but their eyes, their experiences, their knowledge looks at you totally differently than the way you would even look at you. If I could physically look at me from outside of me, it's going to be different than if you looked at me or if Nora looked at me.
Right.
And to hear someone else tell me something and to be open to that, it's like, oh, I see it. Okay. And then I can make a change because now my eyes are open in a much different way.
No, that's awesome. So agree. Yeah. It's a fun conversation.
Preaching to the choir a little bit, but it's very true. It's very true that, I've told this story in many classes, but I was working with my own Pilates instructor who was here on staff, and I was doing a quadruped movement, and she was trying to get my head in correct position. And what I found was I could put it in position, but as soon as I focused on something else, it dropped. But because my brain was already focusing on something else, I didn't see it drop. I didn't feel it drop. I was focusing on something else. And it wasn't until she kept bringing my attention back over and over and being such a pain in my rear end over and over again. But you know what? In 1 week's time, I drilled it into myself so much because I was like, I'm going to make that change. That the next time she came, she goes, wow, you're able to hold it in position the whole time. And I said, I worked at it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So I had to have that external view.
Yes.
Because I could never feel it myself, because my focus is always going to be, segmented based on the exercise that I'm trying to do and the goal I'm trying to accomplish.
Right. Now that brings me back to what we were talking about earlier, how about practice too. And, a lot of different systems, they say the same thing in different ways, but somatically, I learned that the term 300-3,000, meaning it takes about 300 reps to create a fairly new pattern. It takes 3,000 to make it an unconscious new pattern.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So really, like, if you hold that reality in place, you can kind of get off your own case and just commit to practicing, because it takes time to develop a new pattern. And that's why it's so important that we emphasize to our teachers or our students, if they really want to create a change, they got to commit to practice. Even if it's just a few minutes a day, like 15 minutes a day of mindful movement, I think is better than, 2 hours once a week. I think more often getting frequent hits, especially as you're aging. I notice in my own body and everybody, as you're aging, gravity is going to kick your ass if you're not doing something to actually organize yourself in gravity on a regular basis. So
yes,
I think that's a big deal. But that's I love what you just said, because it then, from you practicing, you feel the change.
Yep.
Which is really inspiring and rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're even looking at people differently. Like it translates directly into our teaching when you embody something new.
Absolutely.
Like in my left shoulder, because I'm strong left, and this is the shoulder I injured, I can move my shoulder blade from here to the East Coast. so I have a really mobile shoulder blade. But to learn how to protract, but keep the head of the humerus back in the socket while I protract, without overusing my pecs, or when I retract, overusing my rhomboids in my middle back, because that's been my strategy to stabilize my shoulder, has been a new learning. So, and then to be able to take that into weight bearing and really correct it, so I can really feel my arms are connected to my core. And I practiced like you did with your head position. I've been practicing it a ton, and it's changed. Like my shoulder is changed in like 3 weeks. My shoulder changed, and I'm like, wow, and I needed that feedback from an outside person to give me manual cueing in variety of positions where it was definitely hard to hold.
Yep.
And then the body figures it out. I could feel my rotator is going crazy for like the first couple of weeks, and now it's basically solid and on, which is
nice.
That just lights me up.
Nice. Nice.
Age is not age determined. It's not about age.
Yeah. No. I remember when I was first in this industry and I had a boss, we had a staff meeting, and these are 20 of us or so, all personal trainers, all, at this one of Hawaii's biggest gyms. And she was our director, and she said, does everyone need a personal trainer? And every one of us was like, no, because we all thought we don't need one. We are personal trainers. We don't need one. And she slammed the table and said, no, everybody needs one. You need one. I need one. We all need someone to watch us.
How great.
Because you don't see everything as much as you think you do. You don't.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And she was doing it for sales, but that really resonated with me that, yeah, we all need something. We all need someone else. That extra set of eyes can be so valuable. And the more experienced the eyes, even better.
Yeah. And it also cultivates maintaining some level of humility and integrity around your learning, and that you're, if we isolate ourselves too much in our own little silo, you can get a combination of internal insecurity and external arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like very rampant in every field on the planet. It can, instead of like having a community of people that you keep it real with, like we need to have ways to keep it real. And for our whole extent of our career, not, sure, Nora and I, all of us have been teaching a long time, but I don't see myself as above any of my teachers. I see myself as just another person on the journey who's part of the team, who has some skills and is very grateful for that. And but the minute I go down that road that I'm above or below, it's kind of like too much time on social media. It's not a good thing.
Agreed.
You get caught up in FOMO, and then you're like, oh my God,
not
a good road.
I mean, that's kind of exactly why a long time ago I started Body, Mind, Spirit. The first conference that I started was because I started to talk to all these Pilates teachers, and they thought they were absolutely brilliant. Like, you would talk to them, and it's like, oh, I'm so good at what I do, and they'd talk to me, and I'd realize when you're alone in a studio with your clients, you're the only, I mean, you do know more than them. That's the nature of the relationship.
Right.
And just this idea of, I know so much more than everybody around me, and I'm brilliant. And my whole goal there was like, okay, let's bring our peers together and let's talk to each other and let's learn from each other, because that's when you really realize where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, what you know, what you don't know, and even where you want to go. Like, it isn't until you find somebody who's like, oh, that's where I want to go. That person has the information or the wisdom or the personality that I'm interested in, or the skills that you can then go, okay, I want to follow that path, right? I want to like see what they know and understand that better, because that's what really gives you the understanding of where you are, what your skills are, and how to grow them and how to become better and more of who you are.
So true. That's where Nora and I actually started at the Body, Mind, Spirit.
Yeah.
And I, forever grateful for you giving me that opportunity to teach there. And I so agree with you that it's liberating to actually see, hey, I don't need to know it all. I need to find out what's my voice and what's my contribution, and how do I collaborate with like-minded people and keep it alive, keep learning, take education when you can, and whether it's online or in person or whatever you can do, keep some way of staying connected to learning at the pace that works for you inside of your current obligations and lifestyle. That's a big deal.
It's like you're learning around your shoulder.
Yeah.
It's like you've been working with your shoulder for 60 some odd years, I mean, more or less, right? And you've had a lot of thoughts about it, and you've had a lot of training, and it's done a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And then you have an injury, or you have something that says, oh, I need to pay attention in a different way.
Yep.
Right. And like learning can do that. Again, having a good teacher can do that. Having an injury can do that. All those ways to kind of wake yourself up and go, I need to look at this differently. Like, how can I look at this differently? And that's what we do for our clients in the best circumstances. We give them the opportunity to look at something differently.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the Franklin training did that a lot for me too, is to kind of step back to evolution, like evolutionarily, why is our body designed the way it is? And that kind of takes away arguments about cueing. When the body has a specific way that it's designed, and that's probably more accurate than anybody's idea of exercise.
Yeah.
And it's much older than any exercise system. You think about we were hunter-gatherers for 1 million years or whatever, and the exercise has been happening for a couple hundred. So if you can look back and go, oh, we're designed to be efficient and move well, like how can I use that information to guide my cueing and how I teach and how I put together programs and all of that, and then teach people to give a little bit of useful information about their body, so then they can hold their attention on that. So I don't think people have an attention problem. I think they don't know where to put their attention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In terms of the body, people are so, I mean, we don't do a good job in any way in this culture or many other cultures at educating people about their bodies at all.
Right.
I mean, to your point, I've seen you in many workshops go, okay, to a group of Pilates teachers, where's your hip socket? And they all point to their greater trochanter.
Right.
Or something else, or somewhere else, right? It's like, where's your actual hip joint, or where is your, atlanto-occipital joint? Like, where does your skull meet your spine? And that's just fundamental. It's like, where is the movement happening from? How does the structure inform what I'm doing?
And it's not that they're bad teachers too; it's that they weren't taught.
No, they weren't taught.
They weren't taught, and that's just like a primary thing for everybody to know, is that when you understand location, it improves function. Mm-hmm. Like right
away. Understand location and mechanics, it improves function. If you kind of know, oh, that's how it should move, it's like, oh, that makes more sense.
Now you have something to actually play with and actually explore, and then you're like, oh, okay. Then your understanding and your exploration are connected and they're accurate, and that's super useful for everybody. You even think of all the core training we've done. And when we're walking around, your six pack isn't part of it, really. So you got a question like what, for the sake of what is all this for? If I'm mainly designed to be upright, How much of it is just an aesthetic idea of our current times, or is it actually useful to help me function better and move better? So I'm always like in that question, because I think there is no bad exercise. It's just exercise done badly. So
yeah.
But I also question, like, based on somebody's lifestyle and how they spend most of their time.
Yeah.
What's the best use of our time together?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Because I'm often looking at, like you are, of how do I counterbalance their 8 hours a day of sitting at a computer, for example, right? Or, I mean, typically that, or driving or whatever. It's like, okay, if that's what they're doing all the time, I want to find some way to get the rest of their body awake, because that pattern is in there. Other patterns may be not so in there.
It's so true. Yeah. So that's the thing. If you're sitting all day, you're definitely more of a compression model. So how do I decompress your body in this workout in some regards? And that's my thinking too. Like, okay, how do I create a little more space, and while we're working on strength, also free up areas of their body, get their breathing a little better, and have them a little bit more aware of how they're relating to gravity on a moment-to-moment basis. Mm-hmm. And I hold that as the backdrop for anything we're going to do in the studio.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
That's kind of a helpful thing. And then even like you were saying earlier, Brian, about pain, like if somebody doesn't have pain, but even if they do have pain, how do we get them to, in their own exploration, find where they have more ease, or they can get out of that pain pattern as an exploration instead of a fix.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be really useful, because then they see that they have some abilities to help themselves.
Yeah. I think functional movement is really what it's all about. And I hate to say that for years, we began to isolate muscles rather than focus on movements. So we focused on, you look at the Nautilus machines when they first came out, you look at all of, we were very focused on specific, muscle groups rather than movement. And then some people started talking about movement patterns, but then they still went back to, a lunge is a great movement pattern. Yes, but it's still in one plane of motion. How can we make it into more movement? And Nora and I talk a lot about turning things into three-dimensional movement, because we want things to be in all the different planes of motion, because that's how we live life.
Right.
And I feel that too often in fitness land, especially, and in Pilates, because I teach a lot of Pilates instructors, people get stuck with, this is the exercise, and I need to do this exercise, instead of, well, let's experiment with this exercise. How can we change it? How can we modify it? How can we make it this? How can we do that? There's no hard and fast way to do it. So we can explore, we can experiment. Yeah,
it's so true. So true, because you think about it too, like in Pilates, or the primary way that we move our pelvis is flexion and extension.
Yes.
But in life, the primary way your pelvic moves is in rotation.
Yeah.
and counter wheels and rotation. So, and that's not really a big part of the repertoire. It's a little bit in like single leg stretch and stuff like that. But as far as rotation in space around the top of your legs, it's not happening as much as it does just in your daily life. And you can see it. Like a lot of times when I'm in an airport, I'm very curious of just watching people walk.
Yep.
And that there's very little movement in the spine, and there's very little rotation, and even the shoulders are staying straight ahead.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, if we just get all that to move, everything's going to feel a little better, and they're going to walk faster with less effort.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that's
absolutely.
That's a big deal. And that's what's great, is that here we are this far into our careers, and we're all still super curious about that,
Well, and we're all evolving. I mean, honestly, it's like, and I think about just, my 30 years in Pilates, it's like when we started, there was that pelvis shouldn't move.
Yes.
Right? Your pelvis should move. And yes, it should be a box, and maybe it moves into flexion, it moves into extension, and that's it. And then that idea, let's say in using a Pilates example, on the chair, doing some alternating leg pumps, right? Seated leg pumps alternating, the pelvis has to move. Like
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. And instead of looking at keeping that stable, looking at, okay, so how does that move in that movement when you're actually doing reciprocal leg action and feeling that and going, okay, is it moving like this? Or is it moving in rhythm? So understand that next level. And I feel like so much of, all three of us and certainly other people in our profession are evolving, right? We're evolving and getting more sophisticated in terms of understanding those subtle things about movement and ways to train them and ways to identify them and ways to really develop them, because that is, those little subtle rotational cues are a lot of what makes the body come together efficiently and effectively.
It's amazing difference. Those little changes make a world of difference on force absorption and ease, strength, and all of that. It's just
power, efficiency, everything.
And it's not big. It's almost, some of it's almost not even visible.
Yep.
It's more internal. It's the bone rhythms. It's all that, and that makes movement feel so much better when you can help people feel that.
Yeah. And again, to your point, it's often really subtle. It's just and sometimes it's just let that happen. Let what naturally wants to happen.
Yes.
Let your hips move. Let's say you're doing a squat. Let your hips move. Let your pelvis move where it wants to go. Let your femurs move. Like maybe they need to be wider. Maybe they need to be narrower. Where do they need to be to give you that optimum efficiency and flow down and up? Like it's going to be different for all three of us.
Yep, absolutely. For the last 9 years, I've been studying something called anatomy in motion, which is really a guy named Gary Ward created this system. He's from the UK. He wrote a book called What the Foot? ? But it's basically how every joint in your body moves in 3 planes during the gait cycle. And it moves from your big toe to your head 5 times in 3 planes in 1 gait cycle, which is like, holy crap, that's a lot.
Right.
Unbelievable. But it really just for me, really getting the coupled action of the foot to the pelvis has been something I've been really deeply studying for a long time. And it's amazing when you can get what the pelvis half does in relationship to the foot. So hip extension and supination are a coupled action. So whenever you're straightening your legs, your foot is moving towards supination. The arch is lifting, the heel is inverting, and the forefoot's turning down into the big toe while the sit bones are coming in. And that's always the case. It's never not the case. And whenever you're bending your legs, your feet are widening and flattening, and the sit bones are widening. So the eccentric pelvic floor, eccentric foot, pronation, hip flexion are a coupled action. So just teaching people how to, you can take it in really simple steps to get just put those pieces together, and force absorption completely changes, knee discomfort changes, ability to bend better and feel that foot to hip relationship improves. And it's, you can put it on the reformer, you can put it in just on the floor, you can do it anywhere. But that's, again, like you were saying earlier, how when the box and keeping everything fixed, same thing around the foot. People have some interesting ideas around the foot too, but if you can let the foot do what it's designed to do, but keep your key foot points on the floor. If your foot's flat, like your ball behind your little toe, big toe, and your heel like a triangle, while the foot is changing shape, then it transfers so much more beautifully through the body. And then the other piece of that I'm finding in my own body, if you're really mobile, how do I help somebody slow down the parts of the body that move too fast?
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on where I want to get movement, how do I slow down what actually is being accelerated? That's for me, if I just focus on that, all of my mechanics change.
Yeah. Because
I'm pretty mobile, so I can, but the parts that are really don't have any resistance move faster than everything else. So that's been a real key thing that I focused on over the last few years with my clients, and I've had really good results around helping them not overly brace, just keep their attention on where they need to maintain the tone to slow down the parts that move a little faster than everything else. And that's been a fun thing to play with.
And this is where, again, that evolution, right?
Yeah.
This is not, it's not necessarily that all this is new, but it's like information comes up through, Gary Ward and other situations, or Eric Franklin. And then what I feel like is that plants seeds
Yes.
in educators. And then we all take those ideas, because this is what we've done forever, and then try to figure out how to turn that into a movement, how to turn that into an exercise, how to turn that into a program, how to teach that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I love that evolution of our industry through that. Like a little piece of information comes our way, like this, rotational components of a walk, right? Of a step. And then you start to feel like, okay, what does that feel like? What does that mean? Where do I put my foot?
Mm-hmm.
Where does have a client put their foot? What does that mean? Like all those processes that I know all of us have gone through is what's so interesting to me. It's like you take this little insight and then you try to turn it into movement, and then you try to turn it into something you can teach. It's just like I love that. I love that evolution of who we are and how we become that.
Well, and I appreciate you for that, Nora, because you've actually brought that to our industry of giving people license to actually explore openly with others. And I think that's like that's what's needed. Like we need to actually be willing to be together and work together and actually explore together, instead of slightly positioning ourselves or being worried about being judged, and let ourselves really like, hey, we're here to actually upgrade what we're doing and explore what's most useful. Not necessarily have all the answers, or, overly promote my widget. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then it's just much more fun.
It's
Awesome.
so much more fun. I mean, I always learn something talking to you. This is why Brian and I have done so many of these podcasts, because I always learn something from him. There's just, the joys in the collaboration for me, always.
Yes, absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Thank you for mentioning What the Foot, because now I have something for my reading list and for our listeners.
Cool.
This is awesome. And I was going to ask you if you had a book that you would recommend, what it would be. So you were ahead of me on that one. Is there anything you want to promote? You said that you wanted to mention your studio.
Center of Balance. We have Pilates teacher trainings coming up. I'll be doing a mentorship beginning in 2025, which will be online. It'll be like a couple hours every couple week mentorship, where I'll have a teacher, where I'll do demonstrations and teaching healthy progressions from an understanding of the body through exercise sequences, where we can just explore together and hopefully upgrade where you are as a teacher and enjoy the process. And Nora will be coming to our studio with me, and next May we're going to do a program together where we do what we're doing right now, which is
awesome,
exploring together. Karen Clippinger will be coming to our studio in November. We have a weekend of trainings with her. And you're always welcome to come and check out having sessions with us at the studio or online. So, if you're interested, just let us know.
Awesome. And that's Center of Balance?
Centerofbalance.com. And we're in Mountain View, California, in the Bay Area.
Fantastic.
We have great space. We have 5,000 square foot studio. We're
beautiful.
Very, very
awesome.
Lucky. Yeah. Great group of teachers. Like most of my teachers have been with us for more than 10 years. Owen's been with me for 22 years. Therese, the PT, has been with me for 25 years.
Wow.
So we have a great group of teachers that are not just great teachers, but awesome people to be with.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I learned
great.
a lot. My desk is just covered with Post-it notes because you were saying so many things. I'm jotting things down. So I'm going to I can't wait till I edit this, because I'm going to relearn.
I'd be happy to come back and continue our conversation sometime. I appreciate you.
We would love
Absolutely.
it. Thank you so much. So much. So for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. Thank you very much, Tom McCook, for joining us. And if you want to get in touch with us, again, movingcombos@gmail.com is the easiest way. Also, hit that like and subscribe button. Check us out on YouTube and Instagram, Moving Combos. For Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We will check you out next time. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.